Good afternoon. Let's see if anyone comes on for our story time. Do you like story time? Mm-hmm. In fact, you like story time so much that you've started doing your own, haven't you? Yeah, Mommy's got to get more of those videos posted.
Yeah, and I think today we should have a Bible story race.
Yeah, Lillian's thought is that she wants to have a race to see who can read the story faster, but maybe another day we'll try that.
I'm trying to switch my timing.
Yeah, she's trying to switch her timing. She does her story time at 4 o'clock. I do mine at 1 o'clock, but she thinks that 4 o'clock isn't a good time, so she's trying to figure that out. Yeah, who are you reading about, Lillian? Who are you reading about in your story time?
Moses.
Moses.
And the Red Sea.
And the Red Sea, yeah.
The Red Sea.
All right.
Actually, I'm going to sit in your lap.
You're going to sit in my lap? Okay. Do you know who we're going to read about in today's story time? We're going to read about somebody that I don't think that we read about enough. It's somebody in the Old Testament, and it's kind of a short story, but it's a good story about faith and about healing. And his name is Naaman.
Naaman?
Yeah. Kind of sounds like his mom liked the word name and just thought she'd turn it into a name. Naaman. Yeah, she was Naaman.
Naaman?
Is that kind of silly?
Yeah.
That was a pretty bad joke. Naaman. But it's about he's actually a king. King Naaman. Or no, he's not a king. He's a general. Sorry. He's a general. Do you know what a general is? A general is a very important person in an army. So he gives the soldiers the orders, and then they follow his orders. So he's a leader in the army. And the story is about Naaman and a servant girl. So he had a lot of power. Do you think the servant girl had a lot of power? No, but we're going to see what happened in the story and what happened between them, and we're going to see who the real power comes from. So what do you think? Should we get started?
Yeah, but okay. Get in your lap.
Oh, you got to get in my lap. All right, you got to get all cuddled up. I hope you're cuddled up at home if you're watching. All right, so we're going to read a story called A Little Servant Girl and the Proud General. And this comes from 2 Kings chapter 5. Naaman was a very important man in a very important army of a very important country. So you see, he was very, very, very important. But Naaman was sick. He had leprosy, which is a nasty thing that stops you from feeling anything. Bits of you fall off without you noticing, like bashed fingers and squished toes. It might sound funny, but it wasn't. And Naaman certainly wasn't laughing. There was no cure. It never went away. And in the end, it killed you. Naaman needed help. Now, there was a little slave girl who worked for Naaman, and she knew someone who could help him. But there was a problem.
What?
Naaman was her enemy. Not long before, Naaman had led an army raid on her home in Israel. He had killed her whole family, carried her off to Syria, and made her into his slave. Every night she cried herself to sleep. She had lost everything. Why would she, of all people, want to help Naaman? Didn't she hate him and want to hurt him back? Didn't she want to make him pay for the wrong he'd done? That's what you would expect. But instead of hating him, she loved him. Instead of hurting him back, she forgave him. I want Naaman to get well, she said to her mistress. There's a man in Israel called Elisha who can heal him. I'll go, said Naaman, loading up his wagons and putting on his flashing armor. But I'll go to the palace, because that's where someone important like me gets healed. So he hurried off to Israel and went straight to the king. My healing, please, he announced. I can do lots of things, the king replied, but only God can heal. Just then, a message from Elisha arrived. "Send Naaman here," it read. So Naaman hurried off to Elisha's house. But Elisha didn't even come out and greet him. He just sent a servant instead. "Doesn't Elisha realize who I am?" Naaman thought. But what the servant said next made him even crosser. That means more upset. "Wash in there," he said. "Just wash?" Naaman laughed. "In that slimy, stinky river?" He looked around to see if this was some kind of joke. It wasn't. Any person can wash in a river, he thought. I am Naaman. I am important. I should do something important so God will heal me. And he rode off in a rage. Of course, you and I both know that's not how God does things. All Naaman needed was nothing. It was the one thing Naaman didn't have. God knew that Naaman was even sicker on the inside than he was on the outside. Naaman was proud. He thought he didn't need God. His heart didn't work properly. It couldn't feel anything. You see, Naaman had leprosy of his heart. Naaman finally agreed to wash in the river, and instantly his skin became smooth like a baby. Naaman wanted to pay Elisha. God healed you. You can't pay, Elisha said. It's free. And so it was that a very sick man was healed, all because of a little servant girl who forgave him. God knew sin was like leprosy. It stopped his children's hearts from working properly, and in the end, it would kill them. Years later, God was going to send another servant to forgive as she did, to forgive all of God's children and heal the terrible sickness in their hearts. Their hearts were broken, but God can mend broken hearts. And that's the end of our story today. What did you think, Lillian?
I thought it was scary.
You thought it was what was scary about it?
I just don't like it.
You didn't like it? What didn't you like about it?
Just didn't.
Oh, okay. Have you heard this story before?
No.
You haven't heard the story about Naaman? I kind of thought that this was an interesting one to include in this Bible, because I don't think that we talk about Naaman a whole lot, but he was in the Bible. Is it important for us to talk about a lot of things that are in the Bible? It's important for us to know even the stories that, you know the story of David and Goliath. We talk about that one a lot. Yeah, but sometimes there's some really good truth even in the stories that we don't spend a whole lot of time on. And I think this story is really good for right now because, you know what, there's probably a lot of people who feel like Naaman. Did you know that Naaman couldn't touch other people? He couldn't touch other people because they might get sick with leprosy if he did. Just like right now when we have to be careful about being around other people because of the virus. So I think we can learn a lot from Naaman right now because what we're going through is kind of the same as what we went through. Isn't that kind of interesting how the Bible always has good things to teach us no matter what we're going through? I think so.
I wonder what our next story is going to be.
What our next story is going to be, well, you'll have to wait until tomorrow at 1 o'clock for our next story time.
And at...
Have you decided on a new time for your story time?
Yes.
Yes, what's your new time?
Right in the morning.
Oh, in the morning. You're going to do your story time in the morning now?
Actually, at the time of your time.
You're going to do your story time at the same as mine?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Actually, no, I don't know.
You don't know. Well, we'll talk about it. We'll see about having a story
know.
race sometime. But I think we've just about wrapped up for today. So can you wave goodbye?
Bye.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story and I hope it encouraged you. And we'll see you again tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Who
All
was
right.
it?
Bye.
Who was it? Who was it?
I think Auntie watched.